British Martini-Henry rifle, of course, is a falling block single shot, and it's based on a couple of other designs, but this gun served the British soldier very well at places like Rorke's Drift.
In the 1850s and the 1860s, there's this revolution going on in terms of firearms development. Countries are moving from muzzle-loading designs to breech-loading designs. Of course, in the American Civil War, you see a lot of testing with breech-loading designs. And one of the designs that is actually tested by the Union Army is a design from a man named Henry Peabody. And the Peabody design is developed in 1862, and it's not really tested until 1864. And the Union decides that they really like this design, but it comes too late. But there are some European nations that are actually interested in this pivoting breech block design that's invented by Henry Peabody. In terms of the British, where they come in, of course, in the mid-1860s, the British are still fielding their Pattern 53 Enfield muzzleloader. And really the question is, does the British military need a breech loader? And in 1865, they hold a trial that actually takes the existing stock of Pattern 53 Enfields and puts them through a conversion process, ironically developed by another American named Jacob Snyder. So after the Snyder conversions are put in place, starting in 1865 to 1866, they embark on the trials programs. They're going to examine the ammunition. They're going to examine the barrel. They're going to examine the stock, and then, importantly, they're going to look at the action. And they settle on a couple different components. They settle on a refined action, but the inherent action itself is from Friedrich von Martini. Now, the barrel, they decide, is going to be made from the design of a Scottish gunmaker by the name of Alexander Henry. And so they mate these two together, and they decide that this is the British service rifle that they want to move forward with. And in order to give credit to the two designers of these two critical components of this rifle, that becomes the Martini-Henry.
The Martini-Henry is an icon of the British Empire. In that span that it was issued from the 1870s until the adoption of Lee Enfields, that was a time in British imperial history that there was quite a lot going on, and in particular the Zulu War. If you think about British troops in far-flung parts of the empire, odds are you're thinking about them with a Martini-Henry.
The Martini-Henry, as soon as you lower the lever, it's fully cocked. There is no safety position on this gun. So on the Mark I's, they actually introduce a safety bar at the bottom to block the trigger from firing. They decide later this isn't really the direction they want to go in. They remove that feature of the gun. They enclose the trigger guard a little bit better, and eventually the Mark I goes into the Mark II in 1877. The Mark II pattern, which is made famous through its use by the 24th Regiment of Foot at the Battle of Rorke's Drift, really was only the cutting edge as far as British service arms go from 1877 to 1880, which the Mark III pattern was introduced at that time. And the Mark III is really minor in terms of modifications. They don't make a lot of external changes. It's really just kind of streamlining some of the earlier modifications. And that serves through most of the early 1880s. And in 1883, again, through this constant process of trying to figure out how do we make this platform better, they decide that they're going to take a look at an entirely different service cartridge. And they decide that they're going to actually go down to a 40 caliber. And by the time they've done all the design and all the research, they have officially designated this new 40 caliber pattern as the Mark IV in 1886.
The Martini-Henry is really most known to American gun collectors today because of its role in Cy Enfield's film from the early 1960s, Zulu. Because the Martini-Henry, aside from just a few Canadian units that had it, they weren't here in America. gun collectors really didn't have the opportunity to even own one or know that much about them. And the movie comes out, and at the same time, martinis start being imported through inner arms.